Hi Evans, my name is Jackson Gruber and I'm here today with my grandfather Henry Gruber, who is 91 years old and a veteran of World War II. He and his older brother Ray Gruber were both in World War II. Both of my great-grandfathers served in World War I in the infantry in Europe. My grandfather was in the Pacific region in support of the war against Japan. My great-uncle Ray fought courageously but unfortunately died fighting the Germans in northeast France. Grandpop's rank was a technician 5th grade, equal to a corporal. Great-uncle Ray was a private first class, trained as a sniper. I read a letter he wrote to Grandpop 2 days before he was killed. He said he had just been to church. Grandpop, would you please share with us your experience, both good and bad, about your time in the Army?
I'll be happy to. I want to talk a little bit about what war is really like. The war in Europe started with the Germans taking over Hungary and Austria and then invading Poland in September 1939. Because of treaties, France, England, and other countries had to come in against and fight Germany. Germany joined with Italy. Japan had already invaded China in the 30s, but were not part of that. The United States got into the war when Japan bombed Pearl Harbor. Why did they do that? Japan was expanding into China and the whole South Pacific because they had no natural resources of oil or coal or gas, and they needed those raw materials. When the war started for us in December 7th of 1941, I was 15 years old and a sophomore in high school. The war lasted from 1941 through 1945 of August. When I finished high school, I was only 17. They had instituted a draft to supply soldiers and servicemen, and I did not get drafted until I was 18, September of 1944. I was drafted into the infantry, and for some special reason, they decided to make me a truck and automotive mechanic. So in addition to regular infantry training during the day, which would go from 5:30 to 6, we would go to school in the late evenings, learning how to fix vehicles, trucks of all kinds. Stop it. One of the side benefits of being in the service is you generally get to travel a lot. I was inducted in New Cumberland, Pennsylvania, trained in Camp Landing, Florida for my initial 13 weeks basic. I was fortunate enough to be assigned to advanced automotive mechanic training and spent 13 weeks at Fort Benning, Georgia. The day I shipped out of Fort Benning, the war was ended in World War in Europe, and I was switched to go west. We spent 7 days in boxcars, essentially going across the country to San Francisco, and where we took a ship to the Southeast Pacific. Everybody should remember that because of secrecy agreements, you could never tell anybody where you were going, and you weren't told where you were going, so you never knew. That was so that people couldn't find out and take countermeasures. It took 21 days on a boat to get to Manila in the Philippines. It was very, very hot. This was May when we were going over there, and we had it was rough on the boat. You only get to eat twice a day because we had 2,000 people to feed, and it was a small boat, and so we ate in tiers. There was no cold water at all. You slept on metal cots, which are stacked 10 feet deep down in the steel hold, and it was very hot down there. Generally, we'd spend time on decks during the night. We were allowed up above board as long as we didn't have any lights showing. We were a fast boat, And so we traveled out of convoy until we were past Hawaii. And when we got to the Philippines, we found out it was the Philippines, period. We landed in Manila Bay, past probably 40 or 50 ships that had been sunk there during the war, and had to go 2 miles across the bay to the beach. And one of the remembrances I have to this day is when we stepped onto the beach. We were coming off of landing crafts for invasion. That there was sand and dirt, just like the United States. I don't know what I expected, but it was different. The second nicest thing was the Salvation Army was there serving cold pineapple orange juice mixed. And it was the first cold drink we had had in 21 days. We were loaded on the essentially gondola cars, which are open. Although after we had to march across Manila through the wrecked areas. And we went through jungle and rainstorms in that open train. It was pulled by a steam locomotive. When you went through tunnels, it wasn't too nice. Eventually got to our permanent outfit. New people like myself go to what's called a replacement depot. I was assigned to a unit which had fought all the way up from Australia along the string of islands. They had been in a number of battles. Now, for every person supposedly on the line fighting, okay, there's 8 or 10 people behind working in supply units, various functions, keeping them on there. I was assigned to, I'm still in the infantry, but a signal corps unit, which the main job was to run telephone and telegraph cable and set up switchboards for communications. So this was called the Signal Heavy Construction Battalion, and by some quirk we were attached to the 5th Air Force, so we had aviation tacked onto our names. Very long. We had 155 vehicles. We only had 500 people. Everybody was a specialist. You might be a truck driver, you might be a crane operator, so you could set poles. You might operate a truck, drill holes in the ground to set the poles. I was a mechanic, and there were 12 or 14 of us running those trucks. And these trucks had been through invasions for 3 years coming up from Australia. So they took maintenance, and we had to work on them. But our main objective at this time, the war in the Philippines was almost over. The war in Okinawa was still, the battles in Okinawa were still to come, as was Iwo Jima. So that war was going up there. We were preparing for the invasion of Japan. Our job, 12 hours, 14 hours a day. We only worked 6 days a week, okay? But we had light strung and work at night, was to equip those trucks for making a water invasion. In other words, we had to put snorkels on them so they could breathe and go through 6 feet of water. We had to seal all the vents in all the gear cases so they wouldn't get water in them. And we had to put 50 caliber machine guns on these vehicles, which had never really been fired in combat before. And after a while during the summer, we kept hearing shouting and shooting at night. And somehow the Filipinos had found out that the bomb had been dropped. And a few days later, that August the 8th probably, okay, we heard the war was over. We were all very, very happy to hear that because it meant we didn't have to invade. We had already seen how the fortifications were built in the Philippines. The Japanese had dug tunnels in all the rocks in the mountains. At that point, they still hadn't taken all of Manila yet. They just surrounded the center of the old wall part and let the people starve because it was so deadly. The Japanese were known to be suicide people. They would fight to the death. They would never surrender. If you recall, in Okinawa, we lost like 20,000 people, and they lost 50,000 because they decided they weren't going to surrender. I arrived in Japan on November the 11th of 1945. We were going to be an occupying troop there. We didn't do much work because they already had communications Luckily, we went to a city called Kyoto, which is probably over 1 million people, the size of Philadelphia. It was the only large city not bombed during the war. It was supposedly marked number 3 on the atomic bomb list. So in that city, everything was just as it had been. The trolleys ran, the stores were all open, things like that there. We lived a relatively easy life, taking care of the trucks and doing some communications work. But eventually we were deactivated and sent down to the southern island of Kyushu. The main island of Japan is called Honshu. And we worked down there a little bit in an Air Force base, maintaining diesel generators and things like that there. Japanese people were very nice to us. Okay, we had no problems. We would go anywhere by ourselves. We were never worried about being beat up or robbed or anything else like that. They invited us into their homes. We learned the customary tea service. They had a ritual service where they sit down and all get together. The Japanese people were starving. They had had very little food and weren't getting much more. They would do anything to get food for us there. Turn off. I'd like to return and discuss a little bit about why I was in Kyoto. Kyoto was not bombed because it was theoretically the 3rd on the atomic bomb list. But I got to visit large cities, like I got into Tokyo, Nagoya, Nara, Osaka. We drove into Nagoya trying to get some machine equipment to work on the trucks. We visited aircraft factories. And we got to the edge of Nagoya, which had been a city of 2 million people. We could see nothing for 1.5 miles down the main highway. The debris had been cleared, but what we could see for that 1.5 miles and half mile on each side were the concrete steps, a vault from a bank, remains of a chimney. Everything else had been destroyed by firebombing. Downtown Nagoya, the buildings were bad. They only built 6-story buildings in those days because of earthquake damage. All right, but a lot of them, the tops were off. Okay, it was pretty bad. We went to the aircraft factory, and it was huge, and obviously, and they had taken all these planes and bulldozed them into a pile on the runways that they had built. There were many planes left, probably hundreds. And we thought it was a shame. We were fixing trucks up to run, and these people were going to destroy all those good planes, which the military eventually did. We ended up in Kyoto by taking our vehicles, which were perfectly usable, driving down to Osaka at the harbor, putting them on a ferry boat, going out and driving off the end of the ferry boat and sinking all 155 vehicles. Even we thought this was crazy, but we did it. When we were going through, we had weekends off and going downtown Kyoto. There was a department store, 4 or 5 floors, and in wandering through it, there was a street artist there. The Japanese, of course, are great artists of all kinds, and she was painting portraits. I asked her if she would do a portrait of me, and so this is a portrait she painted. It took about 25 minutes, and I'm going to show it to you. And the date is on it, and it's her signature. Okay, and the work is quite nice. Good. Going back to the bombing and the devastation, fire bombs killed more people than a atom bomb. They estimate that Hiroshima, Nagasaki may have lost between 65,000 and 100,000 people. But in Tokyo, which was also devastated by firebombing, they lost 100,000 people in an evening. The fires would be so intense, just firebombing, okay? that they would create these big suctions. They would actually suck people in from the outside. The flames would go hundreds of feet in the air. It's well known this is what happens when you have a huge fire. A similar tactic was employed by us allies over Hamburg in Germany, where they decided to wipe out the city one night. So war is not a nice thing, okay? Even if it's only a few people killed, it's never good, and it's a very bad thing. And I got to come home in the spring of 46, and luckily I got a ride on an airplane. So instead of 21 days back, I was back home in about 50, 60 hours, and stopped in at Guam and Johnston Island in Hawaii, landed in San Francisco, and luckily I was supposed to go by train, but they had some empty planes going, so I flew into Washington. So I was home in 3 days, okay. I didn't tell my parents I was coming home because it was uncertain. And I called them from downtown Philadelphia railroad station at 2 o'clock in the morning, tell them I was going to be home in 30 minutes. And we spent there. There's lots of other things to talk about, but I'm very happy to have been served in the war. Anybody who serves for the United States as a member of the armed forces should be proud. You learn to be proud of what you're doing. You learn to be patriotic for the country, and it's a good learning experience. I would not exchange it for anything.
Thank you, Grandpop. I really appreciate you going through your memories from over 70 years ago. We are all very proud of you, and thank you for your service to the nation. Happy Memorial Day!
Bye-bye.